You're welcome back. This is The Pulse with me, Ernest Mino. Let's go live to the northern region and speak to our northern region correspondent. We are celebrating farmers all across the country today. Let's find out what's happening there. Martina Bugri joins us on the line. Martina, what can you tell us from the northern region? What has been happening as we celebrate Farmers Day today?
The various districts were tasked to celebrate the Farmers Day in their various districts, and so that was done across the region. I attended that of Sanergo municipality, and that was held at the Vitin, the Canville RC School Park. The program ended a while ago, and we've moved from there. But some of the highlights were our Greek director raised concerns of storage for rice. He says that there's been a bumper harvest, even though there was the fall armyworm outbreak, but there was a huge rice gotten from the farms this year. And so storage was a problem because there were no place to store these foodstuffs. One other concern he raised was that he said the region experienced a 6-week drought, and that affected maize production. But in all, he says the Planting for Food and Jobs has increased food production, and what they should be looking at now is storage. He tasked the youth and people of the region to take advantage of the program. I spoke to some farmers, and they said that they harvested so much rice, but there's no place to store, no market for the rice. And some said what they are doing now is what they got from last year, and they are giving it out to people on credit. And so you take it, you go, when you sell and make profit, then you come and pay them their money. And that's how they are surviving. But they're asking government to do one thing. If the program is successful and there is no market, then it's not worth it. And so they are calling on government to create the enabling environment, the markets, and so that they'll be able to sell these produce when they harvest. The MCE who addressed the gathering also called on the youth to take advantage of the Planting for Food and Jobs program. He says that this year there's been a massive increase and the youth and women are all engaged. She said she was excited because a lot of women have joined the program. She said from in the inception of the program, they have over 500 women who are today farming. She tasked them to also take advantage and continue to enjoy the program. She says 20 dams are under construction across her municipality.
Martina, we'll talk about the dams shortly, but you mentioned that they have issues with storage, which is a big problem for them. Beyond the issue of storage, what other issues are facing the farmers they would want government to address?
They mentioned marketing. They are saying that they have harvested, they have the foodstuff, but nobody is buying. And so it's just like throwing your money away because the foodstuffs are there, nobody is buying. So how do you recoup your money? So they are asking government to ensure that there are markets for these produce so that when they farm, they'll be able to make profit. Now, one other issue they raised was bushfire, especially rice farmers. They say that every year before they are able to finish harvesting, people set bushfires and then it destroys their farm. And so they are taxing government to ensure that laws that are made to protect the environment are followed to the latter so that these people who destroy the environment, if they are prosecuted, people would learn and that would stop. And so these are some of the concerns they raised.
You talked about the one village, one dam, the dams that are being constructed for the villages. Some of them have been enjoying this dam already. Others are yet to receive theirs. But in some communities, the dam is posing a challenge to them. What are some of the issues? You've been following that story.
Yes, some of the issues where they are saying that some of the dams were shortly made. And so a dam that is supposed to last probably 3 months after the dry season will not be able to contain the water, and so they will be running through. And those are some of the issues. Some are saying that those that were constructed, some are too small and they will not be able to use it through the dry season. And so what sense does it make to start the farming, and then you can't have water throughout the season. So those are some of the concerns. Some are also saying that there are existing dams that they have dredged, and they are saying that these are dams they are building. And that's one other concern. I spoke to the assemblyman for Fuo when the former assemblyman for Fuo, when his electoral area was mentioned as one of the beneficiaries of the One Village, One Dam. And he says that no, they can't claim that they built a dam because the dam existed, and what they just did was dredge it. And so they should say that it's a dredge dam they have done.
Martina, closely linked to the issue of marketing is the road network, and we know that in a lot of these areas they have issues with the road connecting the farm to the markets. For instance, did the DCE's government officials lay out any plan to deal with that in the short to long term?
Nothing was mentioned, but the chief of Kanvili raised that concern. He says that especially his area, most of the farms, you can't go through with a vehicle. You probably would have to use a bicycle or a tractor. And so he says that it will not make sense for government to continue to pump money into the agriculture when the roads are not linked to the various market centers. So he made a strong case that if they want the agriculture to develop, then there is a need to also look at the road network, especially in the northern region, where most of these communities, you notice that there are no roads. They have to use footpaths to farms and all that.
The issue of fertilizer has also been a problem where we've had a lot of people smuggling fertilizer, the police actually apprehending some of them. How has that issue been addressed? And for farmers, how would they want government to look at this going forward, especially when government does not believe in providing free fertilizers, for instance?
One thing they mentioned was that the fertilizer distribution has become more partisan. And so when your government is in power, you are able to access fertilizer. When your government is out of power, it's difficult to get the coupon. And so they would want a more liberal system where every Ghanaian can have access. One other issue that came up was how they will be able to secure the country's borders to stop the smuggling of fertilizers. They are calling on government to, especially areas like Saboba, where you can easily just walk across. They are urging government to begin to look at the borders closely and develop a more strong border system where it will be difficult to cross in and out. And so when that is done, they'll be able to protect these fertilizers from being smuggled out of the country. One other issue too they mentioned was that the fertilizer comes in late, and by the time it comes, they have already farmed and had to buy from outside and do the planting, and that's also affecting them in terms of cost. And so they are urging government that when the next season comes, they try and bring the fertilizer earlier so that people will be able to use it and then get the benefit.
Martina, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed on the celebration of Farmers' Day in the northern region. A lot of issues happening right there, but the last issue she touched on, which is on border controls, brings us to our next conversation, which is about land. This year, the theme for the celebration is enhancing small-scale agriculture towards agribusiness development. And we are asking that in all of the media engagement so far, various ministers have spoken about mechanization, about technology, financing for small-scale farmers and what have you. There's been no mention of the state of land policy in the country and how that will improve, and looking at the governance system for land in this country and how that can affect small-scale farming or agriculture. Today, we're going to have a conversation on the land tenure system. And joining me in the studio is the Executive Director of Colandef, Nana Ama Yira. Thank you very much, madam, for joining us.
Thank you.
So you hear government talk about, technology, fertilizer, money from the bank, access to credit and what have you. But there's no issue of land, which is the very basic thing. And we'll come to you shortly to look at how this land tenure system affects farming and how we can revise it going forward. But today, the Accra mayor has been speaking about it near Jesuwa, and he's worried that the continuous takeover of farmland for housing purposes in the city poses a serious threat to food security in the capital.
The 35th Farmers and Fishermen's Day celebration, which is Christian enhancing small-scale agriculture towards agribusiness development, perfectly fits into urban agric. As a result of urbanization, a lot of people have moved into the city looking for space to put up structures, consequently reducing our farm size. It is in this regard that the Department of Agri within the Accra Metropolitan Assembly is encouraging backyard farming, livestock, and fisheries where we have competitive advantage. Chairman, backyard farming has become so significant to supplement the inflows of farm food products from the hinterland. It is also important because you get access to natural, raw, and fresh farm products for use by yourself.
So let me get straight into this and find out from you, what do you make of what the mayor has been saying for starters?
So let me just say good afternoon to our viewers, and thank you very much for having me.
Sure.
The point is, yes, urban agriculture is important, and it supplements, especially for low-income households, the living condition.
Absolutely.
So it's important, and like he said, we are able to produce fresh fruits and vegetables for ourselves, and it enhances the supply that we produce from the kitchen.
And that is healthy.
It's healthy. But you know, we are talking about a bigger situation here. We are not talking about just the urban agriculture. We are talking about the state of small-scale farming in Ghana. And that is a significant conversation we need to put up, and not to put it at the level of just a small level of urban farming. Why? Because in Ghana, and in fact across Africa, small-scale farming is actually the main agricultural activity across the country.
I mean, majority of our farmers today are actually small-scale farmers.
In fact, when I was preparing for this presentation, I tried to do some research. There is no data on how many small-scale farmers we have. But on the AU website, we have some data, some statistics. And it says that in Africa, there are around 33 million small-scale farms that are less than 2 hectares.
Yeah.
That is familiar to us here in Ghana, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you have a small size of farm, about 2 hectares or less, and that is where you have the households, husband, wife, children, and sometimes even extended family working on for their life. I mean, for the rest of their lives. So you have cocoa farm, you have cassava farm, you have plantain farm, you have all manner of farming activities on such a small scale, and that is what the farmer and the household depend on to feed themselves and to get money for other activities. It also says that about 90% of these 33 million farms are undocumented, meaning that this majority of farmers who are the ones producing different types of products for our feeding and for exports are working on lands that are not documented. And the World Bank continues to say that because of the undocumented states, it makes them vulnerable to any kind of acquisition and unfair compensation. And we can identify with this so much because Yes, it is true. And I think I've mentioned it here before that in Ghana, it is even more than 90%. We have about 99% of our farmlands not documented. Meaning that when you go to those rural areas where you have the farmers, some work on Ebunu Ebusan basis, some work on all kinds of arrangements. They work on the land.
Even though a lot of these farms are not documented, there are some traditional or cultural ways of finding out ownership, for instance. So the chiefs are there to help guide, and these things are passed on generation after generation.
So the question on land tenure security is not only about somebody being there to, you know, call out and say, yes, this land belongs to this person, or that I give witness that I gave it. It's much more than that.
So how
it is about you having the guarantee of self-assurance that the land I am occupying, I have the rights, and that right is protected for as long as I have agreed between myself and my landowner. So if the chief gives it to you, and the chief, you rely on the chief's story to confirm your ownership. Now we have a lot of acquisitions for investments. So if an investor comes and they want about 5,000 acres of land for a project, how will the chief come by the 5,000 acres? They will come and gather all the individual parcels that people have, including some vacant land, and put it together to have one piece of 5,000 acres. And because of that, it becomes difficult to say that now I am going to really confirm this transaction I had, which is not documented.
So you're saying that, first of all, this is affecting investment in agriculture.
It does.
So that when people want to invest in large-scale kind of farming, you know, mechanize the process.
Even in the small scale, because in the cocoa sector here in Ghana, all of us have heard of the stories happening in many parts of the cocoa growing areas where cocoa trees are old. Cocoa board has new breeds that are high yielding and they grow fast, and they want farmers to cut down old cocoa trees and plant new ones. But what? They said no. Why? Because they don't know if they cut and they plant the new breeds, what will become their status on the land. They risk losing the land because the chief who granted the land to them is no more, and a new one who has come might use that opportunity to say, no, I'm no longer giving you the land, or even if I give it to you, it's going to be on a totally different terms. So security of land tenure is much more than having the opportunity for someone to say, I can confirm. It is about the institutional arrangements for defending these rights, for securing these rights, and ensuring that even when these rights are challenged, you have the opportunity to go and defend.
Beyond the issue of investment, for instance, in the sector, what are some of the other challenges that we should be looking at as far as the loose state of our land tenure system is, and the undocumented nature which you refer to?
So you see, the situation we have in Ghana as far as small-scale farming and land policy is concerned is not only limited to Ghanaian situation, it's across Africa. So at the AU level, the African states made a commitment and a declaration on land issues and challenges in Africa. There was a 5-point action that was declared in the document.
And this was in July 2009?
Exactly, July 2009.
And Ghana committed to this as well?
Yes. And it's interesting. Let me just read some of the points. The point 1, it says they undertake to prioritize, initiate, and lead land policy development and implementation processes in our countries, notwithstanding the extent of multi-stakeholder contribution to such processes involving also civil society and private sector. And the 2 says support the emergence of institutional framework required for effective development and implementation of land policy and implementation. And the 3rd part says allocate adequate budget resources for land policy development and implementation processes, including monitoring of progress. And the 5th one actually talks about strengthening security of land tenure for women, which requires special attention. So there are a lot of interesting action points that is supposed to engage our attention.
And for me, the bit about the women is very interesting because, first of all, we have an almost insignificant number of women in agriculture,
Yeah.
in farming here in the country. Then we also have a system where women cannot own lands, for instance, in certain areas. Women cannot own lands.
Yeah.
And for most of women doing agriculture or farming, for instance, these are things they inherited from their husbands. A lot of them are widows, and that is the major source of livelihoods. So it's a very important. Do you know how far government, you know, the kind of steps government is taking in addressing some of these challenges? You work with,
Yes.
with the ministry.
Yes. Honestly, it's not too clear that this is the focus of the ministry. It's not too clear that this is the focus of any of the land sector agencies. It's not too clear because even in the current discussion on the land bill, and I mentioned it here the last time I was here, we were proposing that we should have customary land secretariats across the traditional areas in Ghana. These secretariats are offices that would be supported so that transactions at the traditional area level where the farmers operate will be recorded, and it will be the first step of enhancing security for the farmers. But at the discussion, this was mentioned, and it's, you know, it was seen as being too much of a task for government to take on. So we are at a state where even in the land bill, which is the opportunity to make this you know, a critical part of our land system, we did not succeed, and so it is still hanging. We are saying that if we committed to be part of this AU land declaration, then it's important that as a country, we look at how we use this framework to guide our current discussion on the land policy, as well as other aspects that are administrative and managerial that the Lands Commission and the ministry are engaged in, so that we will be able to really pay heed to the theme of our year's Farmers' Day, where we are looking at smallholder farming, developing it into agribusiness.
I hear you talk about, for instance, having a secretariat that will deal with some of these customary issues. We have, you know, the land registration system. My challenge is, how do we do this without adding to the bureaucracy, which is already stalling the process and making it more difficult?
You know, Ernest, I'm sure you know that we have the Lands Commission offices in each of the 10 regions.
Absolutely.
But you and I know that a region is big. So if you take Greater Accra region, it's huge. If you take any of the regions, take the northern region and see the places that the reporter was mentioning, you have land transactions that are going on each day between the farmers and the chiefs. So what we are saying is that, yes, we have the Lands Commission being the main state agency responsible for land registration. But the transactions, the giving out of land is done by the chiefs in the local areas. It is not the Lands Commission. So for us to be able to secure land rights for farmers, we should make documentation a requirement at the point where the transaction is taking place. Because if a transaction takes place at the local level and they do not bring it to the regional capital for documentation, for registration, it ends there. So let us have the secretariat at each of the traditional areas so that at that level, all the transactions by the farmers and all other actors will be recorded. That record serves as a protection. At least it will show that such a transaction has taken place. It will show the terms of these transactions, and it will guide the parties on how to conduct themselves. And to that extent, it will minimize the risk of dispossession or the threat to security of the rights they have.
So you read portions of the AU declaration, the July 2009 declaration, which gives us pointers as to the way forward. But, you know, the issue usually with such declarations and conventions is that it is very broad, but you don't have specific, you know, roadmap that will lead you to achieve some of the targets. Since 2009 till date, can you point to any document that, for instance, government working together with your organization and other NGOs have developed to make sure that we achieve some of the targets set for us?
So one of the things that has happened is that At the Lands Commission level, we have now what we call the Guidelines on Large-Scale Land Acquisition, which is a document that is supposed to provide some guidance on how to conduct due diligence when there is any acquisition on a large scale for investment. That is an innovation in the sector, and it is very commendable. Besides that, I must say that the ministry is very much open in collaborating with various partners. In fact, we have had a very good collaboration with them. The same with Parliament. The Select Committee has been very, very forthcoming in engagement. But in terms of content discussions and having the focus, we still have a lot of work to do, because the focus is still not so much on small-scale farming activities. The focus is still on documenting urban lands for residential purposes, and not so much focusing attention on the small-scale farming activities in rural areas. But that is what this AU policy declaration is about, and that is what we are advocating, that through the customary land secretariats, we can make some steps towards that.
One of the efforts that government has made, or one of the solutions that has been proposed by government, and I know something has started on it, is the digitization of the process at the Lands Commission. It's taken us so long to do this, but what would you say, should be the way forward? Because we have funding for this. The Lands Commission tell us that they're in the process of doing this, but they have to do it in a manner that it is smooth, because you are digitizing documents that already exist on hard paper, and it has to be done in a manner that people are not affected. What do you make of the process so far?
Digitization, yes, but digitizing what? You understand? So when we talk about land documentation, we are talking about the parcel maps. So the site plan, what people usually call the site plan, as well as the land agreements. It is the two together that makes a complete land documentation. So what are we digitizing? So far, there has been a lot of discussions on the maps. We know that some improvements were supposed to be seen under the land administration project, but it still remains a lot in documenting and not so much on the ground. The other point is that, you see, the Lands Commission's work has so far been focused on urban lands, where people in Accra, people in Takoradi, people in Kumasi, and so on and so forth, have acquired parcels of land for residential apartments or for offices or what have you, and they go to the Lands Commission for registration. We are saying that, much as that is good, the other side, which is even more important because of the activities, is in the rural areas, what we call the customary land areas, where people acquire, they use under customary arrangements for farming purposes. And many of these farming activities are the main economic stay of the people, and it contributes to the national economy. And so if we are not having interventions that are addressing the issues at the small scale level, what it means is that, yes, we are digitizing. Yes, we are introducing all kinds of innovations. But unfortunately, we are just looking at one side of the story. The bigger side is not being attended to. And in fact, apart from all the statistics on the farmers that we are talking about now, the reality is that about 80% of all the lands are in the hands of our customary authorities. So what it means is that if we are interested in improving land tenure security for Ghana, then our focus should be on that 80%.
And going forward, what should be done? For instance, if a woman wants your organization to help her secure her land, protect her land, is there any help that you can offer? Yeah,
in fact, we are not only doing it on individual basis as a woman or as, no, but we have actually picked it up from the institutional level.
Okay.
So we have developed a handbook for customary land rights documentation. That handbook has been endorsed by the ministry. The minister has endorsed it. Other actors in the sector have endorsed it. The National House of Chiefs has endorsed it. It is a document that provides guidance on how traditional areas or traditional authorities in Ghana can follow a procedure to document customary land rights.
When did you start
Not
this?
registration, but documentation.
Documentation
Yes.
of the lands
Yes.
which they already
Yes.
own. So,
Which they, so those they already have given out, but going forward, those that will be given out to other people.
when did you launch this handbook, and
So
how does it work? Really?
Yes, so we are actually at the stage where we are about to pilot this handbook.
Okay.
We started the whole conversation somewhere in 2017, and through 2018 we conducted research across the country on how feasible this would be and what elements should be of consideration to make it applicable across the country. And through that we did the drafts, and it has gone through a lot of discussions, and now it is finalized where we are at the stage of the endorsement, going around the consultations and endorsements. So from January, we are planning to launch it in the regional, at each of the regions, working with the regional houses of chiefs and other stakeholders at the regional level, and then from there the piloting is done.
So if this comes into effect fully beginning 2020,
Yeah.
walk me through the process. If I come to your office and I need assistance to secure my land, documentation, which you emphasize, and not just the registration of it.
Because
walk
it
me
is
through
only
the process.
Land
What
Commission
happens?
that's registration. Yes.
Walk me through the process. What exactly happens, and what do I need to present?
So the documentation is to be done at the traditional area level.
Okay.
In Ghana, every traditional area has its land system. In some cases, it is the paramount chief. In some cases, it is the family head. In some cases, it's the overlord, and so on and so forth. So in each area, depending on who the traditional authority is, we work with that traditional authority to set up the system. Okay. What happens is that there has to be sensitization within the traditional area. There has to be an adoption of a resolution by all the traditional leaders in the area. Then there has to be the discussion on, the sensitization of farmers on the existing land uses, collect data on the arrangements between them, what we call the inventory. So you have had this land, what was the arrangement on it? It was given in oral terms, so now bringing it back into documentation, you collect that data and you use that information to draft a simple agreement, and all the templates for this is in the handbook. And so the template is used and filled, and the area is mapped, and it is put into a system. In fact, we are working with some IT companies who are also helping us to put all of this into digitized form, so that at each traditional area, they're able to collect the data very quickly and then feed it into the system.
Just finally, before you go, for many of our farmers, these processes are usually very cumbersome and also expensive. Should they brace themselves for? So
that is why it is at the local level. And that is why it is not registration, it is documentation. So everything is tailored to the local level. And it's not something that is going to be complicated. It's going to be managed by the local actors. It's not Colandef that is going to manage it. Colandef is going to build the capacity, and at the traditional area level, just the way the land transactions have been going on is the same way it will be done, except that this time we are adding the documentation to make it more
and hopefully affordable.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. That's the Executive Director of Colandef, that's Nana Ama Ihira. We've been talking about the land policy and also land security and governance system in the country, because this year our focus is enhancing small-scale agriculture towards agribusiness development, and we are looking at how land plays a critical role in all of this. And thank you very much, Madam, for your time here on The Pulse. Now let's bring